Feel like I've seen this guy somewhere before. Hey everybody, Espira. Today we are covering Universe 7 Goku, the very Zoro-like archetype that gives the entirety of our U7 lineup an additional 5k on the aggression, which lines us up to be a very good aggro mid-range deck. Now, it is not the fastest aggro deck in the game, but there are a lot of options to be able to press your opponent while maintaining board control that lends itself to having a lot of momentum in its side. If you guys just want the deck, well, here you go. In terms of picks though, I think there are a lot of messing around with the ratios to try to account for the format and give us a little bit of flexibility depending on what we're trying to combat again. Kicking it off is the leader, and like I said, nothing special here. Just a draw leader on the front side, and on the back side, you're a draw leader, but now you have the permanent on your turn. All your battle cards with Universe 7 in their special traits gain 5k. So naturally, we want to lean the deck to having a lot of Universe 7 cards. And we get a ton of value from being awakened, because the longer we're awakened, the more that we're getting this benefit. And you have to account for the fact that every swing you get in with the additional 5k is almost like you're getting half a combo's worth of value. So if you can spread that across multiple cards, across multiple turns, you are getting all that benefit. And because we really want to awaken, we're leaning on 12 different self-awakeners alone, plus 2 additional ones if we count the Goku SR. Roshi isn't as good here because you don't have as many hits in the extra card range as you do the other decks, because you really do want to have enough bodies to apply pressure, but is still a self-awakener that can do it twice if it sticks on board, maybe 3 times, who knows. So it really accelerates our ability to be able to start taking our own life. Krillin here has the benefit of being a 20k on our turn, and then on the awakened side a 25k, which is great. And then on play we get to add a card from our life to a hand, which is kind of nice, where there are some board positions where you want to force your opponent to have to attack into you if they want to draw cards. So we can play Krillin, take the life, our opponent attacks into us, and then from there set ourselves up to be able to awaken the turn afterwards and start really going in. Then we're running hit, not a Universe 7, but I think the value of having a 20k on board that's a little bit more sticky provides a lot of value, which is kind of why I've decided to slot him in as opposed to some other option. The incidental 5k is also good at chipping away at the random 1-drops that your opponent might be leaving on board, or to get battle cards down in range for our additional removal suite. Once we're awakened though, obviously we want to be pressing to our opponent, and there's no better attackers to do that than crit attackers. Being able to force our opponents to have to combo, and if they don't combo, they take the hit and that card doesn't go to hand, means we can keep applying pressure and pressure and pressure, and our opponent isn't gaining advantage to counteract that. We have Beerus, a 20k crit when attacking. Choose one of your other battle cards and get an additional 5k for that turn. So there's a 25k crit attacker on your awakened side that's also buffing up another card, and oftentimes his buff will get your other cards into that sweet spot of being 10k over your leader's opponent, thus forcing them to have to pitch a super combo or 2 cards, and that incremental value puts in a lot of work. Then when we look towards our top end, we're running a pair of Gohans. I'm feeling iffy about how many Gohans I want to run. At one point I had 4, at one point I had 2, but I think because of how top end heavy a lot of the deck ends up being, I decided to pull it back, bring us a little bit lower to the ground, but that doesn't change the fact that he's a 25k with our leader awakened, a 30k crit attacker that also gives something minus 10k, so it can remove something off of the board, or it can potentially line up for other plays if it's able to survive for the turn. And finally, for our last crit attacker, the most powerful but also the most techie, Beerus, which is a board wipe for 25ks or less, and then he's a 35k crit, which is a 40k crit. And being in that 40k range is so powerful when you consider that now our opponent's gonna have to go super combo and something else, assuming we don't even combo on top of attacking with Beerus. I do feel a little bit iffy with how many zeros are in the deck, but I do think the 1 tech is super useful for the yellow matchup, for the mirror, and against green there's a number of incidental bodies depending on what point in the game you're at where this could put in work. So I do like the tech, but you can't lean on it too much because already we're struggling in the combo power department, which is made up by the fact that our leader gives 5k aggressively, so we can keep combo power in our hand more defensively than we need to push damage. But it's just something to consider. When we look at our removal suites, the ones that combo well with things like Beerus, the ones that combo well with Son Gohan, we are running Whis, Gohan, and Goku. Whis being able to give something minus 5k turn over turn, so it's something we can set on turn 1, and then effectively our opponent can never leave 1-drops on board, which is really nice. And then once we're awakened, if our opponent's not awakened themselves, it's a 15k attacker, which is some nice additional usage there. Then we've got the Gohan that can clear out small boards, which is really nice. And finally, we've got the Son Goku, which this Son Goku has been the weirdest card to evaluate, in my opinion. The way it reads feels like it plays out not super strong, but then when you realize that in U7 Goku, he's a 30k attacker that also gets rid of a body, can potentially self-awaken you if you're ever held back. It does so many things that it actually plays out really smoothly in gameplay, and there are oftentimes opportunities where he's able to take out a 25k or a 30k if you line it up with your other red plays. But he's a 0 combo, and that's where it starts getting iffy because there are a number of these style of cards that we want to run, but this one is impactful enough in being able to apply pressure while getting the momentum on your side with getting stuff off your opponent's board. It's a mandatory inclusion in my opinion. So we've seen our early game, our mid game. What is our late game looking like? Here we are running the secret rare just as a one of. While I don't think it's a mandatory inclusion, I do think having it in your back pocket if your opponent ever plays into it is just really important to have. I know some people don't play it with the idea being that like if my opponent doesn't know I don't have it, they'll play around it the entire game and I don't have to worry about having a dead card in my hand, which is a consideration. It is a 0 combo, which feels a little iffy, but nevertheless, I feel good about having one in there, especially since he's a 35k attacker, which can apply pressure in a bunch of fun ways against like Broly and stuff like that. And if they're caught lacking, then maybe we're able to get a burn off. And then alternatively, the double strike is very important in this deck because the way that people defend themselves against U7 opens up a lot of positions for the double strike to get in, especially since in this deck, it's a 40k attacker. And already being in that position of being above a super combo against our opponent going into the late game is very relevant in my opinion. But you could cut down this card to 2 and I would get it. I really feel like I want to start seeing it at some points in the game. But again, a lot of 0 costs. Maybe you cut down to 2 and you add in some more mid-range. I could see that, and I don't think that's necessarily wrong. I think that's where some of the flex in the deck is possible. In terms of extra decks, nothing crazy here. We're a Universe 7 deck. We run Master Roshi, so being able to use Assemble Universe 7 for free is also nice. If not, it's just a good combat trick. We need some offensive combo because we often find ourselves not being able to use it because we need to defend ourselves sometimes. And then after, we just have the tech one of God Kamehameha. Generally, we should be able to deal with most boards, but in my head, I'm like, if I'm ever in a position where I'm staring against a Gohan deck, let's say, and he's got a Goku on board, I would rather just have a clean way of getting rid of that Goku and then being able to press the Gohan player as opposed to him having free activations of his energy destruction ability. To round out the ends of the deck, we are running 1-drop TN, and like, I don't love this card. I have a pretty big distaste for vanilla cards because I find them boring, but it is hard to deny a 1-cost 20k, especially when you account for the fact that he's a 10k combo and the deck is struggling for combo power. A lot of 5k combo power in this deck. So having the flex of being a cheap attacker that can sometimes get there, as well as just being 10k combo, I feel like is sufficient to include, but he's a concession I don't like having to make. And talk about concessions, a little bit of concessions in the meta here. We are running a number of frost. There's a lot of yellow going around. This auto wins that matchup. There's a number of cards in blue as well, or the mirror that allows you to be able to shut down. Not a ton, mind you, because obviously their 20ks become 25ks, but nevertheless, there's a number of ways that plays can line up where if you get this out early, you're buying yourself an additional turn or two, which is always welcome. If not, it's a 10k combo. And in this deck, we welcome more 10k combos. In terms of considerations, if you're looking to cut a couple of slots, like I said, we are pretty top heavy. We are pretty 0 combo heavy. If you want to look towards Krillin, that's an inclusion that's pretty good. I just dislike how bad he is on defense, but he is a 10k combo. He's a 20k on your turn. That also gives something -20. Has a lot of value there in terms of tempo. Alternatively, there's the promo Goku. This is the Goku you get for the celebration events. It's a 25k attacker in this deck that also chooses any 10k or less and KOs it. So it combos really well with like your 3-drop Gohans or any of your other negging abilities. I'm just not on it in this deck because I'm trying to think of how many positions in which my opponent will have like a 10 or 15k in which the board is going to stick in. It's probably not going to be too often, but it is a consideration for sure. In terms of the deck, like I said, I think the biggest weakness, unfortunately, is on combo power, but thankfully, because of the way that our leader works, offensively, we don't need to commit so much work into comboing aggressively, which means we can save the little that we have for the defense, and we just have cards like Beerus that gives a buff here and there that are able to kind of hedge us in towards being in those nice sweet spot ranges of being 10k above our opponent and dealing additional damage. I think U7 represents itself as a great pickup deck to learn the game, apply pressure against your opponent, understand the notion of magic numbers when it comes to attacking your opponent, but also has enough room of flexibility to be able to play a little bit of board control game, which is great when you have a slower start. And I love the fact that we can tech in some very impactful cards like Beerus, but not have to deep rely on them to be able to really accelerate our game plan. And as much as I'm not super high on Universe 7, it looks like a fun deck to play and one that can definitely get there against almost any deck, which makes it an exciting pickup. If you guys are looking for any other decks, we are starting to cover all the different leaders in Awakened. Pull some subscribe buttons there if you guys want to catch any other deck profiles. And with that, I'll catch you guys on the next one.